There is a question that humans have carried quietly for as long as we have been able to look up at the night sky. It does not demand an answer right away. It does not rush us. It simply waits. The question is this: are we alone in the universe? To approach this question gently, it helps to slow our thinking down, to set aside urgency, and to let curiosity take the lead instead of certainty. This is not a question meant to be solved in a moment. It is a question meant to be lived with. For thousands of years, people have gazed at the stars not to conquer them, but to wonder about them. And in that wondering, something quiet and human has always stirred. Imagine, for a moment, the earliest humans standing beneath an unpolluted sky. No satellites, no city lights, just darkness and countless points of light scattered overhead. Those stars were not distant objects to be measured or classified. They were mysteries, stories, guides. Some cultures saw them as ancestors watching from above. Others saw them as holes in the sky through which something greater looked back. The question of whether we were alone did not yet have scientific language, but the feeling behind it was already there. As time passed, our tools changed, but the question remained. We learned that the Earth is not the center of everything. Then we learned that our sun is just one star among billions in a galaxy so large that light itself takes tens of thousands of years to cross it. Later still, we discovered that our galaxy is only one among countless others. Each discovery quietly shifted our sense of importance and at the same time deepened the mystery. When we ask whether we are alone in the universe, we are really asking several questions at once. Are we alone as living beings? Alone as conscious observers? Alone as thinkers who can ask questions about existence itself? These are not identical questions, and they do not necessarily share the same answers. It is possible that life exists elsewhere, but not life that thinks or communicates as we do. It is also possible that intelligence exists, but so differently that we would not recognize it as such. To hold these possibilities without anxiety requires patience. The universe does not hurry, and neither should we. Stars are born and die over millions or billions of years. Galaxies collide and merge on timescales that dwarf human history. Against this backdrop, our brief moment of wondering feels small, but not insignificant. In fact, it may be precisely because we are small that the question matters. Modern science gives us new ways to approach the mystery. We now know that planets are common. In the last few decades, astronomers have discovered thousands of worlds orbiting distant stars. Some are hot and violent, others are frozen and dark. A few exist in regions where liquid water could exist, given the right conditions. This does not mean life is present there, only that it is possible. Possibility, in this context, is a very quiet word, but a powerful one. Life, as we understand it, requires certain ingredients: energy, stability, time. On Earth, life emerged surprisingly early once conditions allowed it. This fact often leads to a gentle question. If life appeared here relatively quickly, could it appear elsewhere just as easily? Or was Earth an extraordinary exception, the result of an almost impossible chain of coincidences? There is no rush to answer this. Both possibilities remain open. There is also the matter of scale. The observable universe contains hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. Even if life were exceedingly rare, existing on only a tiny fraction of planets, the numbers involved suggest that it could still arise many times. But numbers alone do not guarantee reality. They simply invite contemplation. At the same time, there is silence. We have not yet heard a clear signal from another civilization. We have not received a message that says, unmistakably, you are not alone. This silence has been interpreted in many ways. Some see it as evidence that intelligent life is rare or fleeting. Others suggest that civilizations may choose not to broadcast their presence. Still others propose that we may not be listening in the right way. or that we have not been listening long enough. It is important to notice how much of this question reflects us back to ourselves. When we imagine other beings in the universe, we often imagine versions of our own hopes and fears, friendly neighbors, distant observers, indifferent intelligences, hidden dangers. These images say as much about human psychology as they do about astrophysics. Wondering about others is also a way of wondering about who we are. There is no need here to arrive at an answer. The universe does not require our conclusions in order to continue unfolding. What matters, perhaps, is the act of asking itself, the way the question slows us down, the way it stretches our sense of time and place, the way it gently loosens the grip of certainty and replaces it with humility. As we rest with this question, we can allow it to remain open, like the night sky itself, not something to solve, but something to sit beneath. And in that quiet space, before evidence and theories and debates, there is a simpler feeling, a sense of being a small, thinking presence in a vast and patient universe, wondering softly what else might be out there, waiting to be understood. To continue gently, it helps to shift our attention from the question itself to the setting in which the question exists. The universe is not just a backdrop for curiosity, it is an active, unfolding environment, shaped by time, motion, and change. When we ask whether we are alone, we are asking within a universe that is still becoming what it is. Even now, long before life appeared anywhere, there was darkness. After the first moments of expansion, matter cooled, gathered, and slowly formed the first stars. These early stars lived brief, intense lives, creating heavier elements in their cores, before ending in vast explosions. In this way, the universe learned to make complexity. The atoms in your body were once part of stars that no longer exist. This fact is often stated plainly, but it carries a quiet implication. Life, at least in its material form, is woven into the story of the cosmos itself. As galaxies formed and evolved, regions of relative calm emerged. Around some stars, disks of gas and dust settled into planets. Most of these worlds were hostile by human standards. Some were too hot, others too cold, many lacking stable atmospheres or liquid water. Yet a small number occupied a narrow range, where conditions might allow chemistry to grow more intricate over time. This range is sometimes called the habitable zone, though the word habitable should be treated carefully. It does not mean inhabited. It means only that certain processes could, in principle, occur. On Earth, those processes led from simple molecules to self-replicating systems, and eventually to life capable of awareness. But this path was neither smooth nor guaranteed. For billions of years, life remained simple. Single-celled organisms dominated the planet, quietly shaping the atmosphere and oceans. Complex life came much later, and intelligent life later still. This long delay raises an important and often overlooked point. Even if life is common, intelligence may not be. When we imagine other beings in the universe, we often picture them as technological, communicative, and curious, much like ourselves. But this may be a projection. It is entirely possible that the universe is filled with life that never builds radios, never looks outward, never wonders about the stars. Such life would still count, and yet it would remain silent to us. Time adds another layer of complexity. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. Human civilization, by contrast, has existed for only a few thousand years, and our technological phase for barely a century. If other intelligent civilizations exist, their timelines may not overlap with ours. They may have risen and vanished long before we began listening, or they may emerge long after we are gone. In this sense, being alone may not mean being the only ones, but being the only ones right now. This idea can feel unsettling at first, but it also invites a calmer perspective. The universe does not coordinate experiences for simultaneous participation. It allows events to unfold independently, each following its own rhythm. Our presence, brief as it is, still matters within our moment. The question of others does not diminish the meaning of our own existence. There is also the possibility that intelligence, once it arises, tends toward inward focus rather than outward expansion. Advanced civilizations may turn their attention toward efficiency, sustainability, or inner experience rather than exploration. Communication across interstellar distances requires energy, intention, and patience. It may simply not be a priority for minds very different from ours. Silence, then, does not necessarily imply emptiness. It may reflect distance, difference, or restraint. When we listen to the universe and hear nothing back, we are hearing through instruments and assumptions shaped by human experience. We search for signals that resemble our own, using methods that make sense to us. This is reasonable, but also limited. It is worth noticing how comfortable we are with life that does not speak. Forests do not communicate with radio waves. Oceans do not send messages, yet they are full of activity, awareness, and interconnection. If life elsewhere exists in forms equally unfamiliar, it may be present without ever announcing itself. As the question unfolds, it becomes less about discovery and more about perspective. Are we expecting the universe to mirror us, or are we willing to accept forms of existence that challenge our definitions? Are we listening for reassurance or for truth, whatever shape it takes? The night sky remains unchanged by these questions. Stars continue their slow fusion, planets continue their silent orbits, and here on Earth, life continues its quiet persistence. The question of whether we are alone does not interrupt this flow. It simply rests within it, waiting for us to return again and again, not to answer it, but to sit with it a little longer and let its uncertainty gently expand our sense of what is possible. To move forward without haste, it helps to consider how humans have tried to formalize this question, not to reduce it, but to hold it more carefully. At a certain point, wondering became calculation. Curiosity took on the language of probability, not to replace awe, but to guide it. One of the most well-known attempts to do this is a simple framework, often called the Drake equation. Despite its name, it is not truly an equation meant to be solved. It does not deliver a single number. Instead, it is a way of organizing uncertainty. It asks us to consider a sequence of conditions, each one narrowing the field slightly, each one open to revision. How many stars are formed each year in our galaxy? How many of those stars have planets? How many of those planets could support life? How many of those actually develop life? How many go on to develop intelligent beings? How many of those develop technology capable of communication? And finally, how long do such civilizations last? None of these questions has a definitive answer. Some are becoming clearer with observation, others remain deeply uncertain. The value of the framework is not in its outcome, but in the way it slows our thinking, encouraging us to acknowledge how much we do not yet know. What becomes apparent is that the universe offers many opportunities for life, but very few guarantees. Each step from chemistry to consciousness appears to require not only the right conditions, but also time, stability, and perhaps a measure of chance. Earth experienced mass extinctions, dramatic climate shifts, and cosmic impacts, yet life persisted. Whether this persistence is common or rare remains an open question. There is a quiet tension here between two ideas. One suggests that life, given the right ingredients, naturally emerges. The other suggests that life is fragile, dependent on a delicate balance that is easily disrupted. Both ideas can be supported by evidence, depending on where one looks. The universe seems generous in materials, yet unforgiving in circumstances. Another perspective comes from the study of extremophiles, organisms on Earth that thrive in conditions once thought impossible for life. Deep beneath the ocean, near volcanic vents, life exists without sunlight, drawing energy from chemical gradients. In frozen regions, in acidic lakes, in environments of intense radiation, life persists. These discoveries expand our understanding of what life can tolerate, and by extension, where it might exist elsewhere. Still, tolerance is not the same as flourishing. Complex, intelligent life may require more than survival. It may require long periods of relative calm, where evolution can explore possibilities without being constantly reset. Earth's history includes such periods, but also long stretches of instability. The emergence of intelligence here may have been shaped by a rare alignment of factors. As we consider these possibilities, it is important to notice how easily the conversation can drift toward judgment. Words like rare or common carry emotional weight. If we are rare, we may feel special, or alone. If we are common, we may feel connected or insignificant. Yet rarity does not equal value, and commonality does not erase meaning. A single tree in a desert is no less real than a forest. There is also the question of what we mean by intelligence. Human intelligence is shaped by language, social structures, and tool use. But intelligence may take forms that do not rely on these traits. It may be distributed rather than centralized. It may be slow rather than fast. It may be inward rather than outward. Our instruments are not yet tuned to detect such differences. When we imagine contact, we often imagine communication, messages, signals, encounters. But contact may not look like this at all. It may occur through subtle influence, through shared environments, or through traces left in cosmic patterns. Or it may never occur, not because others do not exist, but because the universe does not require interaction to validate existence. In this sense, the question of being alone becomes less about counting civilizations and more about understanding separation. Space is vast. Light takes years, centuries, millennia to cross it. Even within our own galaxy, meaningful exchange would be slow and fragile. The universe allows for presence without proximity. As these thoughts settle, there is no need to resolve them. They are not problems demanding solutions, but reflections inviting patience. The question remains open, not because we have failed to answer it, but because it is larger than any single answer could be. And so we remain here on a small planet, circling an ordinary star within a galaxy among many, listening carefully not just for signals, but for understanding, allowing the silence to speak in its own way, and letting the mystery remain gentle, unforced, and quietly present. As we sit with this quiet uncertainty, another idea begins to surface, one that does not come from astronomy alone, but from reflection. It is the idea that the question of being alone may not only be about others, but also about connection itself. What does it mean to share a universe, even without meeting? From one perspective, the universe appears indifferent. Stars form and collapse without regard for observers. Planets drift through space whether or not they are seen. Yet from another perspective, the universe has produced at least one place where matter reflects on itself. That fact alone invites a pause. Consciousness, however it arises, seems to be one of the rare ways the universe becomes aware of its own existence. If this is true, then the question shifts slightly. It is no longer only, are we alone? But also, what does it mean that we are here at all? The presence or absence of others does not erase the strangeness of our own awareness. Even if we were the only thinking beings, the universe would still contain this singular phenomenon, a place where questions are asked. Some philosophers suggest that intelligence may be less like an accident and more like a potential, one that emerges when conditions allow. In this view, the universe is not aimed at producing life, but it is not opposed to it either. Given enough time and variety, complexity arises naturally. If this is the case, then awareness may appear in many places, quietly and independently, like isolated candles lit in a vast dark room. These candles may never see one another. Distance and time may keep them forever separate, yet they would still share something fundamental, a common origin in the same physical laws, the same unfolding cosmos. In that sense, being alone would not mean being disconnected. It would mean being part of a larger pattern that does not require direct contact. There is also the idea that intelligence may tend to self-limit. As civilizations grow more advanced, they may recognize the risks of expansion, the fragility of ecosystems, the costs of interference. Rather than spreading outward, they may turn inward, refining experience rather than territory. Such civilizations would be quiet by design, not because they are absent, but because they have chosen restraint. This possibility challenges some of our assumptions. We often equate progress with visibility, activity with significance. But stillness can be a form of wisdom. Silence can be a choice. The universe may be full of life that has learned to exist without announcing itself. From a human standpoint, this invites humility. Our methods of searching reflect our own stage of development. We listen for radio waves because that is what we use. We scan for structures because we build them. But other intelligences may have passed through these phases long ago, or never entered them at all. They may communicate in ways that leave no lasting trace, or none that we know how to recognize. It is also worth considering the possibility that we are early. The universe will continue for trillions of years. Stars like our sun will burn for billions more. Life elsewhere may simply not have had time to emerge yet. In this scenario, we are not alone in principle, but alone for now, pioneers in a young cosmos. This idea carries both loneliness and responsibility. To be early is to be unaccompanied, but also to be formative. Our choices, our values, our understanding of life may shape what comes later, even if indirectly. The universe may be watching itself through us for the first time, yet even this thought does not demand certainty. It invites care rather than pride. If we are early, then patience matters. If we are rare, then preservation matters. If we are one among many, then respect matters. In all cases, the question leads us back to how we live here. Now, the night sky, unchanged in appearance, holds all of these possibilities at once. Each star could be empty, or alive, or something beyond our categories. We do not need to decide which is true in order to feel the weight of the question. The act of wondering is enough. As these reflections settle, the pace naturally slows. The universe does not rush toward answers, and neither must we. The question of being alone remains open, not as a gap to be filled, but as a space to rest within, where thought can drift, curiosity can soften, and the vastness above can simply be allowed to exist, quietly, patiently, and without demand. To continue this slow unfolding, it is helpful to turn our attention inward for a moment, not away from the universe, but deeper into our relationship with it. The question of whether we are alone does not exist in isolation. It emerges from human awareness, from our capacity to reflect, to imagine beyond immediate surroundings, and to feel the weight of vastness. Human beings are pattern seekers. We look for meaning in noise, for order in randomness. This tendency has served us well on Earth, helping us survive and cooperate. But when we extend it to the cosmos, it can lead us to expect clarity where there may only be openness. The universe does not owe us companionship, nor does it owe us solitude. It simply is. Yet the feeling of aloneness carries emotional resonance. To imagine that we might be the only conscious beings in existence can feel isolating, even heavy. It can also feel profound, as though we carry a unique responsibility. These reactions tell us something important. The question is not only scientific, but deeply psychological. In quieter moments, people often ask a softer version of the same question. Is anyone else out there who understands? Is there meaning beyond what I can see? The cosmic question mirrors a personal one. Looking into the universe, we're also looking for reassurance that awareness is not an accident, that curiosity is shared, that existence is not entirely solitary. From this perspective, the search for other life becomes a reflection of our search for connection. Even if we never find another civilization, the act of looking affirms something about us. It says that we value relationship, that we extend our sense of kinship beyond our own species, even beyond our own world. There is a quiet irony here. We often worry about being alone in the universe, yet we are still learning how to live well with one another on Earth. Our planet is filled with life, intelligence, and complexity, and much of it remains misunderstood or overlooked. Perhaps the question of others is also an invitation to deepen our attention to what is already here. This does not diminish the cosmic mystery. It grounds it. The universe is vast, but our experience of it is always local, always embodied. We ask grand questions from small places, from within fragile bodies, on a planet that must be cared for regardless of what lies beyond. Some thinkers suggest that the value of the question lies not in its answer, but in how it expands our moral imagination. If we consider the possibility of other beings, we may become more aware of our own assumptions, our tendency to center ourselves. We may become more patient with difference, more cautious with certainty. There is also the possibility that we are not meant to know, not yet, or not at all. The universe may contain truths that are inaccessible to beings of our scale and duration. This is not a failure. Every perspective has limits. A mountain cannot see the ocean, and a cell cannot comprehend the organism it belongs to. Limitation is part of existence. In this light, not knowing whether we are alone becomes a kind of companion itself. It walks alongside us, shaping our stories, our science, our philosophies. It keeps us looking outward and inward at the same time. It resists closure, and in doing so, keeps curiosity alive. As the search continues through telescopes and equations, through quiet nights and drifting thoughts, it is worth remembering that the universe has already answered one question. It has shown that it can produce life that wonders. That alone is not nothing. And so, as we let this segment gently fade, the question remains, unhurried and unresolved, resting in the space between stars and thoughts alike, inviting us to listen not only for voices beyond our world, but for the deeper resonance of curiosity itself, quietly echoing, without urgency, into the vast and patient dark. As the question continues to rest with us, it naturally draws us toward the idea of listening, not listening in a dramatic sense, but in a patient, methodical way. Over the past century, humans have learned how to extend their senses far beyond the limits of the body. We have built instruments that can detect faint light, subtle vibrations, and distant signals that have traveled for years before reaching us. In doing so, we have begun to listen to the universe in new ways. One of these efforts involves scanning the sky for patterns that do not arise naturally, signals that might suggest intention rather than chance. This search is careful and restrained. It does not assume that messages are waiting. It simply acknowledges the possibility. The universe is filled with noise, the background hum of cosmic radiation, the static of stars, the interference of our own technologies. Against this backdrop, finding something meaningful requires patience and humility. So far, what we have heard is silence, or rather, nothing that clearly stands apart from the natural processes we already understand. This silence has been given many interpretations, some more dramatic than others, but it is important to remember how brief our listening has been. We have been capable of detecting certain kinds of signals for only a tiny fraction of cosmic time, Expecting a response within this window may be unrealistic. There is also the matter of distance. Signals weaken as they travel. Even a powerful transmission fades into the background over vast stretches of space. To be noticed, it would need to be deliberately strong, deliberately aimed. This assumes not only the existence of another civilization, but a shared moment and a shared intention. Another possibility is that communication does not take the form of continuous broadcasting. A civilization may send signals briefly, during a short technological phase, and then move on to other methods or priorities. If so, the chances of overlap become even smaller. Two civilizations could exist in the same galaxy and still never detect one another, separated not only by space, but by time. These considerations invite a quieter response to the silence. Rather than seeing it as a void, we might see it as a reminder of scale. The universe is not built for immediacy. It unfolds slowly, often beyond the pace of expectation. Our desire for answers is human, but the cosmos operates without regard for urgency. Listening also requires interpretation. Even if a signal were detected, recognizing it as artificial would be a challenge. It might not resemble language. It might not follow patterns we associate with meaning. It could be subtle, embedded within phenomena we currently classify as natural. Our understanding evolves, and with it, our ability to recognize what we are hearing. In a way, the search teaches us as much about ourselves as it does about the universe. It reveals our assumptions, our hopes, our fears. It shows how deeply we wish for connection, and how carefully we must approach the unknown. The act of listening becomes an exercise in restraint, a practice of openness, without expectation. There is also a quieter form of listening that does not involve instruments. It is the listening that happens when we reflect on our own existence. The fact that we can ask whether we are alone suggests that awareness has reached a certain depth. We are not merely reacting to the world, we are contemplating our place within it. From this perspective, the universe is not silent. It speaks through structure, through pattern, through the laws that allow complexity to arise. It speaks through the slow formation of stars, through the delicate balance that allows planets to remain stable, through the improbable chain of events that led to life on Earth. These are not messages in the conventional sense, but they are forms of expression. When we widen our definition of communication, the universe becomes more expressive. It tells a story of expansion and change, of simplicity giving rise to complexity, of matter organizing itself into forms capable of reflection. Whether or not other beings are part of this story remains unknown, but the story itself continues. As we rest with these thoughts, the silence feels less empty. It becomes spacious, a space in which questions can exist without pressure, a space in which listening is not about waiting for a reply, but about remaining attentive to what is already present. And so the question of whether we are alone remains suspended, not unanswered, but unhurried, drifting gently through our awareness, like a signal still traveling, not yet arrived, but already meaningful in its journey through the vast and patient universe. As the quiet listening continues, another layer of the question begins to reveal itself, one that is less about distance and detection, and more about perception. What if the universe is not empty of life, but full of forms we do not yet know how to see? Human perception is narrow by necessity. Our senses evolve to navigate a specific environment, at a specific scale. We see a thin slice of the electromagnetic spectrum. We hear a limited range of vibrations. We experience time in a linear, forward-moving way. These constraints shape not only what we perceive, but what we imagine to be possible. When we search for life elsewhere, we often search for reflections of ourselves. Carbon-based chemistry, liquid water, planetary surfaces, these criteria are reasonable, grounded in what we know works. But they are also assumptions. Life elsewhere may not follow the same patterns. It may arise from different chemistries. exist in different states, or occupy environments we currently consider uninhabitable. There is a subtle distinction between what is impossible and what is unfamiliar. Many things once thought impossible later became understood. Microorganisms were invisible before microscopes. Radio waves were undetectable before receivers. Entire layers of reality existed unnoticed, not because they were absent, but because we lacked the means to perceive them. In this sense, being alone may be partly a matter of perspective. The universe may contain life that is too small, too large, too slow, or too different for us to recognize. Intelligence may operate on timescales far longer than a human lifespan, with thoughts unfolding over centuries. To such beings, our brief technological moment might be indistinguishable from background noise. There is also the possibility that life exists not on planets, but within systems we do not associate with biology at all, in dense clouds of gas, in the magnetic fields of stars, in the complex dynamics of plasma. These ideas remain speculative, but they remind us that our definitions are provisional. Life, at its core, is a process, not a form. When we say we are searching for life, we are really searching for activity that resists equilibrium, that organizes energy in a sustained way. This can take many shapes. Even on Earth, life expresses itself through countless strategies, from the simplest bacteria to the intricate networks of ecosystems. To assume that all life must resemble our own may limit our ability to notice it. The same applies to intelligence. Intelligence does not have a single expression. It can be collective rather than individual. It can be embedded rather than explicit. It can manifest through adaptation rather than invention. Our focus on technology as a marker of intelligence may say more about us than about intelligence itself. These reflections do not make the search meaningless. They deepen it. They encourage a form of curiosity that is patient and flexible, willing to revise its assumptions. The universe does not conform to our expectations. It invites us to expand them. At the same time, there is comfort in acknowledging limits. We do not need to perceive everything to belong. We do not need to detect all forms of life to affirm our place in the cosmos. Awareness does not require completeness. It requires presence. There is a quiet balance here between humility and wonder. Humility in recognizing how small our window of perception is. Wonder in recognizing that even this small window reveals so much. The stars we see are ancient. The light we receive has traveled across space and time. The fact that it reaches us at all is a kind of connection. As we sit with this idea, the question of being alone softens. It becomes less about absence and more about relationship. Relationship not only with others, but with the universe itself. We are participants in a vast process, shaped by forces we did not choose, asking questions that arise naturally from awareness. And so, without needing to resolve anything, we can allow the possibility that the universe is richer than we can currently know, that life, intelligence, and awareness may take forms that lie just beyond our reach, that silence may be a threshold rather than a void. In this space of not knowing, there is no urgency, only a gentle invitation to remain open, to continue listening, and to let the mystery breathe, slowly and quietly, as the universe continues its long and patient unfolding. As we remain with this openness, another thought gradually emerges, one that concerns not what exists elsewhere, but how we respond to the possibility of it. The question of whether we are alone does not only shape our science and philosophy, it also shapes our sense of identity. Throughout history, humanity has repeatedly had to adjust its self-image. We once believed the Earth was the center of everything. Then we learned it was one planet among many, orbiting an ordinary star. Each shift felt at first like a loss of importance, and yet each also expanded our understanding of reality. We were not diminished by these discoveries. We were reoriented. The possibility of other life follows the same pattern. If we are not alone, then we are part of a broader community of existence, even if we never meet its other members. If we are alone, then our awareness becomes even more precious, a rare expression of the universe's capacity to know itself. Either way, the question reframes what it means to be human. There is a quiet temptation to seek validation from the cosmos, to hope that others exist so that we do not feel isolated, or to hope that no one else exists so that we feel unique. Both desires are understandable. Both reflect emotional needs rather than cosmic truths. The universe, however, does not arrange itself around our preferences. Instead, it offers us a mirror. How we react to the possibility of others reveals how we understand ourselves. Do we imagine cooperation or conflict, curiosity or fear, respect or dominance? These projections tell us something about our own history, our own challenges, and our own unresolved questions. If contact were to occur, it would likely unsettle many assumptions. Ideas about intelligence, culture, and meaning would be challenged. Even the concept of other might shift. We are accustomed to defining ourselves in contrast to what we are not. Encountering a truly alien presence would test this habit in ways we can barely anticipate. But it is also possible that no such encounter will happen, that we will continue to wonder without confirmation. This, too, has consequences. It places the responsibility for meaning firmly in our hands. Without external reference points, we must decide how to live with one another, how to care for our planet, how to use our knowledge. In this sense, the silence of the universe does not absolve us of responsibility, it heightens it. Whether or not others are watching, we are here. We are capable of reflection, of choice, of compassion. These capacities do not depend on cosmic companionship. There is a subtle freedom in this realization. We do not need to wait for answers from beyond in order to act with care. We do not need confirmation of others to recognize the value of life. The universe may be vast and indifferent, but meaning can still arise locally, through relationship and attention. As these thoughts settle, the question of being alone becomes less heavy. It loosens its grip. It transforms from a demand into an invitation to consider how we define significance, how we relate to uncertainty, how we find belonging in a universe that does not offer easy reassurance. The stars remain distant, the silence remains intact, and yet here we are, thinking, feeling, listening. The universe has given rise to this moment, this awareness, this gentle wondering. That, in itself, is not nothing. As we allow the pacing to slow, there is no need to draw conclusions. The question can remain open, resting lightly in the mind. Whether we are alone or not, the universe continues, and within it, so does our capacity to reflect, to care, and to remain curious, quietly and without urgency, as the night unfolds around us. As the mind continues to rest within this open space, it becomes natural to turn toward time itself. Not clock time, but cosmic time, the kind of time that stretches so far beyond human experience that it can only be approached gently through imagination and approximation. When we ask whether we are alone, we are also asking when we are. The universe is old, older than any story we have ever told. For most of its existence, there were no planets, no chemistry complex enough for life, no stable environments where awareness could take root. Stars had to be born, live and die before the raw materials for biology even existed. In this sense, life did not appear early. It appeared when the universe was ready. Our own planet formed roughly 4.5 billion years ago. Life emerged not long after, but intelligent, reflective life arrived very late in the story. If the entire history of the universe were compressed into a single year, human civilization would appear only in the final seconds before midnight on the last day. This perspective does not diminish us, it situates us. Time changes how we understand loneliness. Two people can exist in the same city and never meet, if their lives do not overlap. In the same way, two civilizations can exist in the same galaxy and remain forever unaware of one another, if their moments do not coincide. The universe may be full of life across time, but sparse within any single instant. This idea softens the silence. It suggests that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but evidence of scale. We are listening during a very brief window, with tools still in their early stages, across distances that dilute even the loudest signals. Expecting immediate confirmation may be like standing on a shore for a moment and concluding the ocean is empty because no ship passes by. There is also the possibility that intelligence does not last long. Civilizations may rise, explore, and disappear within relatively short cosmic intervals. Technology can be powerful, but also fragile. Societies may change direction, lose interest in communication, or face challenges that limit their longevity. If this is common, then the universe may experience intelligence in flashes rather than continuities. This possibility carries a quiet gravity. It reminds us that awareness is not guaranteed to persist, that reflection, curiosity, and culture are delicate achievements. Whether or not others exist elsewhere, the fact that they might vanish before being known echoes something familiar from human history. Civilizations on Earth have risen and fallen, leaving traces that must be carefully uncovered. In this light, the universe does not feel empty. It feels layered, filled with moments that have come and gone, leaving subtle imprints. Some of those imprints may be forever beyond our reach. Others may be waiting, faint and distant, to be noticed by future generations with tools we have not yet imagined. Time also invites patience. We often frame the question of being alone as something that should be answered within our lifetime, or at least within our era. But the universe does not operate on personal timelines. It unfolds at its own pace. Answers may come slowly, or indirectly, or not at all. This does not mean the question is misplaced. It means it belongs to a longer conversation. From this perspective, we are participants in an ongoing inquiry that extends beyond us. We inherit questions from the past, and we pass them forward. Our role is not necessarily to conclude, but to contribute, to refine methods, to expand understanding, to remain curious without demanding closure. There is something quietly comforting in this. We do not need to carry the full weight of the mystery alone. We share it across generations. The night sky that stirred wonder in ancient observers is the same sky we look upon now, even as our understanding deepens. The question endures, not because it resists answers, but because it adapts to new ways of seeing. As we sit with cosmic time, the urgency of the question eases. Whether we are alone right now becomes less important than the fact that we are capable of wondering at all. That the universe has produced a moment where it is being contemplated from within, and so, without resolving anything, we allow time to stretch. We let the question drift beyond immediate concern, resting instead in a broader awareness of scale and patience. The universe is still unfolding. Our listening has only just begun, and somewhere, across distances of space or time, possibilities continue to quietly exist, unannounced, unhurried, and waiting in their own way to be understood. As we gently move forward, it is natural to reflect on what it means to ask such a profound question at all. Are we alone in the universe? Is not just a scientific query. It is a deeply philosophical and even spiritual one. It touches on the nature of existence, on the meaning of consciousness, and on the way we situate ourselves within reality. Human beings have long sought to understand not only the physical world, but their place within it. Across cultures and centuries, myths and philosophies have emerged to explore what it means to be part of a larger whole, or separate from it. Some traditions see the universe as alive, conscious, or imbued with purpose. Others see it as vast and indifferent, a stage for chance and change. Neither view offers definitive answers, but both express the same underlying human longing to belong, to matter, to connect. Asking whether we are alone is a way of reaching beyond the confines of the self, of imagining other centers of awareness, other points of light in the dark. This longing is not limited to the search for extraterrestrial life. It also manifests in our relationships with one another, with nature, and with time. The question invites us to consider what it means to be connected, whether physically, emotionally, or spiritually. It encourages us to hold the tension between isolation and belonging. In philosophical terms, this tension is ancient. It is reflected in ideas of the other, in the sense that selfhood is defined in relation to that which is not self. The presence of the other, whether another person or an alien intelligence, challenges and expands our identity. It forces us to see ourselves differently. Yet the other is not always present. Often, we encounter absence, silence, or difference that feels like separation. The universe, vast and mostly unknown, presents us with this reality in its grandest form. We wonder if there is another mind, another voice, another experience alongside ours. And we also learn to live with the possibility that there may not be. This does not make our existence any less significant. On the contrary, it highlights the preciousness of awareness itself. The fact that we can ask these questions, that we can reflect on our solitude or connectedness, is itself remarkable. It suggests that meaning arises not only from external relations, but from the very act of contemplation. In this way, the universe becomes a mirror. Its vast silence reflects back our own interior space. The question of others becomes intertwined with the question of self. To wonder about being alone is also to wonder about the nature of consciousness, about the boundaries of experience, about the ways in which we are both separate and part of something greater. There is a quiet humility in this realization. It acknowledges limits without despair. It accepts mystery without resignation. It embraces the unknown as fertile ground for thought and feeling. The question also encourages openness. It invites us to hold our assumptions lightly, to be willing to be surprised, and to listen with patience. In doing so, it transforms from a problem to be solved into a journey to be experienced. As this journey unfolds, we may find that the question itself shifts. It may no longer be about finding others out there, but about understanding the nature of existence right here. It may guide us toward a deeper appreciation of the interconnectedness of life, the fragility of consciousness, and the wonder of simply being. And so, as this segment gently draws to a close, the question remains, softly and patiently present. It asks not for answers, but for presence, not for certainty, but for curiosity, not for resolution, but for the quiet unfolding of thought, feeling, and wonder as the universe continues, vast and waiting around us. As we linger with this gentle sense of wonder, another quiet thought begins to take shape, one that moves beyond questions of life's presence to the very nature of existence itself. When we ask if we are alone in the universe, we are also asking about the fabric of reality, about what it means to exist anywhere at all. The universe we observe is vast and mysterious, yet it is governed by laws that hold steady over unimaginable distances and epochs. Gravity, electromagnetism, and the forces that shape matter all operate with consistency. These laws create the conditions for stars, planets, and eventually, life to form. But they also hint at something deeper, that reality itself is structured in a way that allows complexity, and with it, awareness. In some ways, the emergence of conscious beings is a natural consequence of these conditions, not inevitable, but possible. From the interactions of particles to the formation of galaxies, there is a flow from simplicity to complexity, from randomness to pattern. And somewhere within this flow, minds arise that can reflect on their own existence. This reflection invites us to consider the possibility that existence is not merely a backdrop, but an active process. Some philosophical perspectives suggest that consciousness is woven into the very fabric of reality, not just a product of matter, but a fundamental aspect of being. Others see consciousness as a rare phenomenon, emerging only under special circumstances. Neither view can be confirmed or denied with certainty. Both invite openness to mystery. They ask us to consider the universe not only as a collection of objects, but as a space of experience, relationship, and becoming. If consciousness is indeed a fundamental feature of the cosmos, then the question of being alone takes on a new hue. It may not be a question only about other beings in distant places, but about the extent to which awareness is expressed throughout reality. Are we isolated sparks in a vast darkness, or is consciousness a more widespread, though perhaps subtle presence? This perspective encourages a shift in how we perceive connection. It suggests that separation may be less absolute than it seems. Even without direct contact, we may be linked through shared participation in the unfolding of existence. On the other hand, if consciousness is rare and fragile, then its emergence on Earth is all the more precious. It would mean that the universe has produced a unique window through which to glimpse itself. This window may be solitary, but it remains meaningful, a beacon of presence within the vast unknown. Both possibilities inspire reverence, whether for the hidden depths of the cosmos or for the singular miracle of our own awareness. Either way, they call us to a humble recognition of our place in the grand scheme, neither claiming dominion nor despairing of insignificance. As we contemplate these ideas, it becomes clear that the question of being alone is intertwined with the question of meaning. How do we find significance in a universe so immense and often indifferent? How do we anchor ourselves amid such vastness? These are not questions with straightforward answers. They are invitations to exploration, philosophical, emotional, and spiritual. They open space for personal reflection as well as shared inquiry. The silence of the cosmos, then, is not merely emptiness. It is a canvas for these questions to arise, a space in which we can place our own hopes, fears, and dreams. It reminds us that existence is a mystery to be lived, not only a puzzle to be solved. As this thought gently settles, the pace softens. The universe continues its quiet dance of matter and energy, time and space, consciousness and possibility. And within that ongoing unfolding, we find ourselves not separate, not fully known, but present and curious, allowing the question to breathe slowly and endlessly, like a quiet current beneath the stars. As the quiet currents of thought carry us onward, another subtle question arises, one that asks us to consider not just if others exist, but how we might recognize them if they do. Recognition is a deeply human process. It requires both seeing and understanding, but these are never simple or immediate acts. Throughout history, humans have encountered difference in many forms. Other cultures, languages, ways of life. Each encounter has demanded a shift in perception, a willingness to stretch assumptions and expand empathy. Recognition is not automatic. It is a process that unfolds over time, often unevenly and with difficulty. If we were to encounter other forms of life or intelligence beyond Earth, the challenge of recognition would be magnified many times. We would face beings whose very nature could be unlike anything we have imagined. They might communicate in ways beyond our senses, embody consciousness differently, or exist within realms we cannot directly perceive. This possibility invites humility. Our frameworks for understanding are built from human experience, and they may not fully apply elsewhere. The expectations we carry could blind us to subtle forms of presence. To recognize the truly alien, we may first need to unlearn some of our certainties. In a way, this challenge reflects the broader human experience of encountering the unfamiliar. When we meet another person, we do not instantly grasp their full reality. Understanding deepens through listening, patience, and openness. The same principles may apply on a cosmic scale. There is also the question of language, how communication might bridge difference. Language is more than words. It is shared context, emotion, and intention. Without some common ground, communication can falter. Yet even in human history, communication across cultures has been possible, imperfect, but meaningful. This suggests that if we seek contact, we might start by listening deeply, not only for signals, but for signs of pattern, order, and intentionality. We might learn to recognize forms of expression that do not fit conventional ideas of language or intelligence. The possibility of recognizing others also raises questions about identity. If we find life that is radically different, how will that challenge our sense of self? Will we see ourselves reflected or shattered? Will we expand our understanding of what it means to be conscious, alive, or intelligent? These reflections do not demand immediate answers. They ask us to hold the question gently, as a space of wonder and possibility. They remind us that recognition is as much an inward journey as an outward one. In this way, the search for others becomes a search for understanding of the universe, of life, and of ourselves. It invites us to explore not only the stars, but the depths of empathy and imagination. As this thought settles, it leaves a quiet openness. The universe, vast and mysterious, continues beyond our sight and sense. Yet within that expanse, the possibility of connection remains, not as certainty, but as invitation. And so, as the pace slows and the silence deepens, the question lingers softly. How will we know when we are no longer alone? Not as a demand, but as a gentle echo, a whisper carried across the dark, waiting patiently to be heard. As the question of recognition gently fades into the background of our thoughts, a new and delicate idea begins to unfold, one that invites us to consider the very nature of intelligence itself. When we imagine life beyond Earth, we often picture beings that think, communicate, and act much like ourselves. But intelligence, in its broadest sense, may be far more diverse and mysterious than our familiar models suggest. On Earth, intelligence takes many forms, not only humans, but also dolphins, elephants, crows, and even some octopuses display complex behaviors and problem-solving abilities. Yet each species experiences and interacts with the world in unique ways, shaped by their environments and evolutionary histories. This diversity hints that intelligence may not be a single, uniform trait, but a spectrum of capacities. It may manifest as sensory perception, memory, social cooperation, tool use, or something less tangible, like awareness of self or others. To extend this idea beyond Earth, it is plausible that other intelligences might be structured in ways beyond our imagination. For example, what if intelligence exists in forms that do not require physical bodies? Some theories speculate about life based on silicon, plasma, or even information itself. Such intelligences might not perceive the world through sight or sound, but through electromagnetic fields, chemical gradients, or quantum processes. Their modes of thought and communication could be radically different from ours. This broad view encourages a reconsideration of what it means to be intelligent. It moves away from human-centered criteria and toward qualities like adaptability, complexity, and the capacity to influence one's environment. It also suggests that intelligence might exist on multiple scales, from microscopic networks to planetary systems. Alongside this, there is the possibility that intelligence can be collective rather than individual. On Earth, some social insects operate with a kind of swarm intelligence, where the group exhibits behaviors that transcend any single member. Similarly, advanced extraterrestrial life might be distributed across vast networks, or integrated within their environments in ways we have yet to comprehend. This possibility challenges us to expand not only our scientific definitions, but also our philosophical understanding of consciousness and agency. What does it mean to be a self? To have intentions? To possess knowledge? Exploring these questions gently dissolves the boundaries between us and other, reminding us that intelligence is not a fixed category, but an evolving process. It is something that may be discovered anew with each encounter and redefined in light of new experiences. In this way, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence becomes not only a search for others, but a mirror reflecting the depths of our own minds. It calls us to approach the unknown with openness, curiosity, and humility, aware that what we find may challenge our most basic assumptions. As this thought softens, it invites reflection on our current place within this spectrum. Human intelligence is remarkable, but it is also limited. Our perceptions, biases, and frameworks shape what we notice and how we interpret it. Recognizing this is a form of wisdom, opening us to possibilities beyond ourselves. And so, the question of whether we are alone unfolds into a larger meditation on the nature of intelligence, consciousness, and existence. It invites us to listen for subtle forms of awareness, to consider patterns beyond our immediate grasp, and to remain patient with the unfolding mystery. As this segment draws to a close, the vastness of possibility remains, quietly pulsing in the background of thought. The universe continues its slow, deliberate dance, and within it, intelligence, known and unknown, may be quietly thriving, waiting for its moment to be seen or understood. As the contemplation of intelligence lingers softly in the background, our attention naturally turns to the delicate question of communication. How beings, whether human or otherwise, might share understanding across the vast gulf of space and difference. Communication is, at its core, an act of connection, an attempt to bridge separations and create shared meaning. On Earth, communication takes countless forms, from spoken language and written symbols, to gestures, expressions, and even the subtle dance of pheromones and chemical signals. Each mode is shaped by the needs and capacities of the creatures who use it. Communication is not just about transmitting information, but about establishing relationships, expressing intention, and weaving communities. When we imagine communicating with life beyond Earth, the challenges multiply. Without a shared history, language, or even sensory framework, how could meaning be conveyed? What symbols or signals would be recognizable? How might intentions be expressed without assumptions rooted in our own experience? Some scientists have approached this problem by considering universal concepts, mathematics, physics, patterns in nature that might transcend cultural or biological differences. Prime numbers, for example, or the periodicity of elements, could serve as common ground. Yet even this approach assumes that others perceive and value patterns in ways similar to us. The act of communication, therefore, requires both sender and receiver to engage in a kind of dance, each adapting, interpreting, and responding. This process takes time and patience, even among humans sharing a language. Across cosmic distances and differences, the dance becomes more delicate, its steps uncertain. There is also the possibility that communication might be non-verbal or non-physical. Some have speculated that advanced beings might exchange information through fields or forces beyond our current detection. Others imagine forms of contact through shared consciousness or resonance, concepts that border on the poetic, but invite thoughtful consideration. These ideas challenge the limits of what we consider possible, urging us to hold space for forms of connection that lie beyond current understanding. They invite us to cultivate openness, not only to new information, but to new ways of relating. At the same time, communication requires vulnerability. It is an acknowledgement of difference and the willingness to be misunderstood. To truly listen is to accept uncertainty and to remain present without rushing to conclusions. In this way, the question of communication becomes deeply human. It echoes our daily experiences of trying to be heard and to hear others, to build bridges across silence and distance. It reminds us that connection is often fragile but persistent. The potential for contact with other life forms thus becomes a metaphor for the broader human condition. The desire to belong, to be understood, and to understand in return. It encourages patience with the unknown and compassion for the unfamiliar. As this thought softens, the vast silence of space takes on new texture. It is no longer simply empty, but filled with potential. Potential for signals, for encounters, for new stories to unfold. The universe becomes a place not only of mystery, but of quiet invitation. And so, as this segment slowly winds down, the question remains unspoken but felt. How might we open ourselves to the profound challenge of connection beyond ourselves, without rushing, without demanding, simply holding the possibility gently, as a light waiting to be recognized in the vast dark? As the idea of communication gently recedes, another subtle reflection invites itself into our awareness, that of meaning and purpose in the vast expanse we call the universe. When we ask whether we are alone, we are also, in a quieter way, asking whether life and consciousness carry significance beyond themselves. This question has long occupied human thought. Some traditions find meaning in a divine or cosmic order, where existence unfolds according to a purposeful design. Others see meaning as something we create through our choices, relationships, and awareness. Still others accept that meaning may be elusive or transient, yet no less real for being so. Whatever perspective one holds, the enormity of the cosmos challenges the scale at which meaning is often conceived. In a universe billions of years old, with countless stars and possible worlds, how do individual lives or civilizations fit? How does significance emerge amid such vastness? One response is to embrace humility, recognizing that meaning may not be universal or absolute, but local and emergent, like the intricate patterns of a snowflake or the delicate balance of an ecosystem. Meaning can arise from relationships and interactions rather than existing as a fixed property. This view suggests that significance is woven through the very process of existence, the dance of energy and matter, the unfolding of life, the emergence of awareness. Each moment of reflection, each act of kindness, each creative impulse adds to a tapestry that is constantly evolving. In this sense, the question of being alone is inseparable from the question of how we create and sustain meaning. Whether or not other intelligences exist, the universe invites us to participate, to observe, to wonder, to care. This participation carries a quiet responsibility. It calls us to attend to the fragile beauty of life on our own planet, to cultivate compassion within our communities, and to approach the unknown with respect and curiosity. It reminds us that meaning is not given, but discovered, not imposed, but lived. There is also a gentle paradox here. The search for meaning can both comfort and unsettle. It can provide a sense of purpose, yet also reveal the limits of understanding. It can connect us to something larger, while emphasizing our individual finitude. Embracing this paradox opens space for contemplation without urgency. It invites us to live with questions as companions rather than obstacles, to allow meaning to arise gradually, like dawn spreading softly across a landscape. As we sit with this thought, the vastness of space feels less empty and more inviting. It becomes a canvas for the imagination, a backdrop against which life's delicate patterns can be appreciated. And so, without seeking closure, we let the question rest, quiet and patient, amid the unfolding mystery of existence, as the universe continues, slowly and gracefully, beyond our sight and understanding. As the gentle unfolding of meaning settles in, our thoughts naturally turn toward the interplay between curiosity and uncertainty, the twin companions on this vast journey of exploration. When we wonder whether we are alone, We are engaging with the unknown, stepping softly into a realm where answers are not guaranteed. Uncertainty is elusive. Curiosity is a quiet force. It nudges us gently, encouraging inquiry, without insisting on immediate results. It invites questions not to be rushed, but to be savored, reflected upon, and sometimes set aside to return to later. This patient curiosity respects the vastness of the cosmos and the limitations of human knowledge. Uncertainty, on the other hand, can feel unsettling. It asks us to hold space for not knowing, to resist the urge to fill silence with easy conclusions. Yet it also opens the door to wonder and possibility, allowing multiple perspectives to coexist without conflict. Together, curiosity and uncertainty create a rhythm of exploration that is slow and deep. They ask us to move beyond the binary of knowing and not knowing into a more fluid space where questions themselves are meaningful. This rhythm can be especially soothing when faced with questions as profound as the presence of life beyond Earth. Instead of demanding answers, we learn to dwell in the question, letting it expand our awareness and enrich our imagination. Curiosity encourages us to listen to the stars, to our own reflections, to the subtle hints of existence that may lie just beyond perception. It helps us appreciate the patience required to understand a universe that does not hurry. Uncertainty teaches humility. It reminds us that our models, however sophisticated, are still approximations. It cautions against assumptions and invites openness to revision, growth, and surprise. In embracing both, we cultivate a mindset that is gentle with itself. We allow space for doubts, for changing perspectives, for the gradual emergence of insight. This mindset transforms the search from a race to a journey, from a test to a meditation. There is beauty in this approach, a beauty that mirrors the quiet unfolding of the cosmos itself. Just as galaxies spin slowly, stars are born and die over eons, and life evolves through countless small steps, so too does understanding grow through patient attention. This patient curiosity also connects us to one another. The collective effort to explore, question, and learn weaves a subtle thread of connection across time and space. Each inquiry builds upon those that came before, contributing to a shared unfolding. As this thought gently softens, the vast silence of the universe feels less like an absence and more like a space filled with potential. It is a space in which questions live and breathe, where curiosity lights the way through uncertainty. And so, as this segment draws quietly to a close, the invitation remains to continue listening, wondering, and dwelling with the unknown, slowly and softly, as the cosmos continues its endless and patient dance. As the rhythms of curiosity and uncertainty intertwine softly in our thoughts, a new reflection begins to emerge, one focused on the human impulse to explore, to reach beyond what is immediately known or visible. This impulse has driven us from the earliest days of our species, inspiring journeys across oceans, the mapping of continents, and the investigation of the smallest particles and the farthest stars. Exploration is more than movement through space. It is a movement of the mind and spirit. It is the gentle unfolding of questions, the willingness to venture into the unfamiliar, and the openness to change. The search for life beyond Earth, then, is part of a long tradition, a thread woven through countless human stories. This tradition honors both courage and patience. It recognizes that progress is often slow, marked by small discoveries and quiet moments of insight rather than dramatic leaps. It embraces the unknown not as a threat, but as an invitation. Yet exploration also carries with it a kind of vulnerability. To seek is to admit that there are limits to our knowledge, that there is more to the world than what we have yet grasped. It requires humility and resilience, qualities that are as much inward as outward. When we look to the stars, we engage this impulse on a grand scale. The universe is vast and indifferent to our hopes, yet it also holds the potential for profound connection. The very act of reaching outward, of asking whether we are alone, is itself a testament to our capacity for wonder and reflection. This outward gaze also invites an inward turn. As we explore the cosmos, we are also exploring ourselves, our desires, fears, and aspirations. The journey becomes a mirror, reflecting both the vastness beyond and the depth within. Exploration is, in this way, an act of relationship. It connects us not only to distant possibilities, but to the present moment, to the earth beneath our feet, and to one another. It reminds us that we are part of a larger story, both fragile and enduring. The search for life elsewhere carries echoes of this story. Whether or not we find others, the act of seeking shapes who we are. It calls us to balance hope with realism, openness with discernment, and patience with determination. This balance is subtle and ongoing. It invites us to be gentle with ourselves and the mystery we face, to recognize that some questions may remain unanswered for a time, or even indefinitely, without diminishing their significance. As we let this reflection settle, the vast cosmos feels less distant and more intimate. The night sky becomes a canvas, not only of stars but of stories. Stories of curiosity, courage, and the quiet unfolding of understanding. And so, as this segment slowly fades, the invitation lingers to continue the journey, both outward and inward, with calm attentiveness, gentle wonder, and the steady unfolding of thought as the universe quietly turns beyond our gaze. As the sense of journey continues to unfold, it becomes natural to pause and consider the idea of time itself, because the question of whether we are alone is not only about space, but also about when. The universe is not a static place. It is layered with eras, each separated by spans of time so long that the human mind can only approach them gently, through analogy and patience. When we look up at the stars, we are not seeing them as they are now, but as they were. Light takes time to travel, and that delay quietly reshapes our perception of reality. Some of the stars visible in the night sky may no longer exist, while others may only now be forming, their light still on its long journey toward us. This simple fact introduces a subtle complexity into the search for other life. If life exists elsewhere, it may not exist at the same moment we are listening for it. Civilizations could rise and fade in the time it takes a signal to cross the vast distances between stars. In this way, the universe becomes a kind of archive, filled with echoes from different moments, rather than a single shared present. This perspective can feel disorienting at first, but it also carries a quiet kind of comfort. It suggests that existence is not confined to one narrow slice of time. Life, intelligence, and awareness may appear and disappear like waves, each meaningful in its own moment, even if they never overlap. From this view, loneliness in the universe becomes a more nuanced idea. We may not be alone in the sense that life has never existed elsewhere, but we may be alone in this particular moment, in this particular region of space and time. The distinction is subtle, but it matters. Time also shapes the conditions that allow life to emerge. The early universe was too hot and chaotic for complex structures to form. Only after billions of years did stars forge heavier elements, and planets begin to assemble environments where chemistry could slowly turn into biology. In this sense, life depends not only on place, but on patience. Earth itself is evidence of this long unfolding. For most of its history, life here was simple and quiet. Single-celled organisms dominated for billions of years before more complex forms appeared. Intelligent, self-reflective life has existed for only a brief moment by cosmic standards, a blink within a blink. This brevity invites a gentle humility. If intelligent life elsewhere follows a similar path, then the window during which civilizations can communicate may be narrow. It is possible that many worlds host life, yet few are aligned in time with our own brief moment of awareness. Such thoughts do not diminish the value of the search. Instead, they deepen it, They encourage patience and perspective, reminding us that meaning is not dependent on immediate results. The act of listening itself becomes meaningful, regardless of what is found. Time also invites reflection on impermanence. Stars burn out, planets change, species evolve and vanish. Even galaxies will eventually drift beyond one another's reach. Against this backdrop, the human question, "Are we alone?" feels both small and profoundly brave. To ask such a question is to acknowledge our fleeting place in a much larger process. It is to recognize that awareness itself is something rare and delicate, shaped by conditions that may not last forever. In this way, the question becomes not only about others, but about ourselves. How do we live, knowing that our moment is brief? How do we treat our world, knowing that life here is the result of an extraordinarily long and fragile chain of events? These questions arise quietly, without demanding answers, simply inviting contemplation. As time stretches outward in both directions, the present moment takes on a new texture. Listening becomes an act of presence. Wonder becomes a form of gratitude. The vastness of the universe no longer feels empty, but full of stories unfolding at different rhythms. And as this reflection gently slows, the sense of time itself seems to soften, inviting the mind to rest within the question, unhurried, attentive, and open, allowing the next thought to arrive in its own time. As the sense of time stretches gently around us, another layer of the question begins to surface, one that touches not on distance or duration, but on perception. How we search for life beyond Earth is deeply shaped by how we understand life itself, and by the assumptions we quietly carry about what life should look like. For much of human history, life was understood only through what was familiar. Life meant breathing, moving, growing, reproducing in ways we could observe directly. Even today, despite all we have learned, our definitions remain anchored to Earth. Carbon-based chemistry, liquid water, moderate temperatures, these are the conditions we know support life here. So naturally, they become our starting point elsewhere. This approach is practical and cautious. It gives us a framework to work with, a way to narrow an otherwise overwhelming search. Yet it also introduces a subtle limitation. By focusing on what we recognize, we may overlook forms of existence that operate according to different principles, quieter or stranger than our expectations allow. It is possible that life elsewhere does not resemble life on Earth in any obvious way. It may not build cells as we know them, or rely on sunlight, or even experience time as we do. These possibilities are difficult to imagine, not because they are impossible, but because imagination itself is shaped by experience. This realization invites a gentle loosening of certainty. It asks us to consider that the universe may host forms of organization and awareness that do not announce themselves clearly, or that do not leave signals we know how to interpret. In such a universe, silence does not necessarily imply absence. The search, then, becomes as much about refining perception as about collecting data. It asks us to remain open to surprise, to question our own definitions, and to recognize the difference between what is improbable and what is merely unfamiliar. There is a quiet parallel here with human relationships. Often, we fail to recognize understanding or connection because it does not arrive in the form we expect. In the same way, the universe may be communicating in languages we have not yet learned to hear. This does not mean abandoning scientific rigor. Rather, it means holding rigor and openness together, allowing curiosity to expand without losing discipline. Science progresses not only by confirming expectations, but by noticing anomalies, small deviations that hint at deeper patterns. Throughout history, many discoveries began as such quiet anomalies. Phenomena that did not fit existing models were initially dismissed, only later revealing entirely new ways of understanding reality. In this sense, not knowing becomes a strength rather than a weakness. The question of whether we are alone thus becomes intertwined with the question of how flexible our thinking can be. Are we willing to revise our assumptions? Can we sit with uncertainty long enough for new frameworks to emerge? This flexibility requires patience. It unfolds slowly, often across generations. What seems inconceivable in one era may feel obvious in another. The universe does not adjust itself to our timelines. It invites us to adapt to its complexity. There is also a quiet ethical dimension to this openness. If we imagine life elsewhere as fundamentally different, we are reminded that difference does not diminish value. Awareness, in any form, carries significance simply by existing. This perspective gently echoes back toward Earth, encouraging respect for the diversity of life here. In this way, the cosmic question becomes a teacher. It trains us to listen more carefully, to resist easy conclusions, and to remain attentive to subtlety. It softens rigid boundaries and invites a more expansive sense of belonging. As these thoughts drift, the universe begins to feel less like a puzzle to be solved, and more like a conversation still unfolding. Conversation with long pauses, incomplete sentences, and meanings that reveal themselves gradually over time. Silence within this conversation is not empty. It is spacious. It allows room for growth, for refinement, for perspectives that have not yet taken shape. Listening becomes an act of trust rather than expectation. And so, as this segment gently settles, the mind is invited to rest in that spaciousness, to remain open without strain, curious without urgency, aware without needing resolution, allowing perception itself to slowly evolve, just as the universe continues its quiet, patient unfolding. As the sense of openness settles in, another quiet dimension of the question begins to reveal itself, one that touches on communication. If life exists elsewhere, how would we recognize it? And how might it recognize us? Communication, after all, is not only about sending messages, but about shared reference points, common ground, and mutual intelligibility. On Earth, communication evolved gradually, from chemical signals to sound, from gestures to symbols, from spoken language to mathematics. Each step required a shared context. Meaning did not emerge instantly. It formed through repetition, adaptation, and the slow alignment of understanding between minds. When we imagine communication across the vast distances of space, this process becomes infinitely more delicate. Any signal would have to travel for years, centuries, or longer, stripped of context, arriving alone in the darkness. Its interpretation would depend entirely on the receiver's ability to recognize it as intentional rather than natural. This challenge has shaped how humans have attempted to reach outward. The signals we send are simple, patterned, and sparse. Mathematical pulses, repeating sequences, carefully chosen frequencies. They are designed not to convey stories or emotions, but to say, quietly and plainly, that something intentional exists here. Yet even mathematics, often considered universal, is not entirely free from interpretation. While numbers may describe patterns found throughout the universe, the choice to use them as language is still a cultural decision. It assumes that another form of intelligence would notice, care, and respond in similar ways. This does not make the effort futile. Rather, it highlights the humility embedded in the attempt. To send a message into space is to accept that it may never be understood or never be received at all. It is an offering without expectation, a gesture of presence rather than a demand for reply. Listening carries a similar humility. To listen is to wait, without knowing what, if anything, will arrive. It is to remain attentive to faint patterns, subtle deviations, and signals that may not repeat. It requires patience measured not in minutes or years, but in generations. There is something deeply human in this act of listening. It mirrors the way we listen to one another, not only to words, but to pauses, tone, and what remains unsaid. In the cosmic context, Silence may carry as much information as sound. Some have wondered whether advanced civilizations might choose silence intentionally. Communication can be risky. To reveal one's presence is to become visible, and visibility carries uncertainty. From this perspective, quietness may be a form of caution rather than absence. Others imagine that communication might take forms we have not yet learned to detect, subtle changes in energy, structure, or matter that blend seamlessly into the background of the universe. Signals so integrated into natural processes that they appear ordinary unless one knows precisely how to look. These possibilities gently remind us that detection is shaped by attention. What we notice depends on what we are prepared to notice. In this way, the search for others becomes a refinement of awareness, a training in careful observation. Communication also raises questions about intention. Why communicate at all? Is it for companionship, curiosity, cooperation, or something else entirely? On Earth, communication serves many purposes, from survival to art. Elsewhere, the motivations could be very different, or entirely unfamiliar. This uncertainty invites restraint. It suggests that any contact, if it occurs, would require patience, care, and humility. Understanding would not arrive fully formed. It would unfold slowly, through tentative steps and careful listening. There is a quiet parallel here with how understanding grows within a single mind. Insights do not arrive all at once. They emerge gradually, often through silence, reflection, and repetition. The universe, in this sense, may be speaking softly, in a language that rewards attentiveness over urgency. As these reflections drift, communication begins to feel less like transmission and more like relationship. A relationship that may never become explicit, yet still shapes how we see ourselves and our place in the cosmos. To reach outward is also to declare something inward, that we are willing to listen, that we are curious, that we recognize the limits of our own perspective. Even without response, the act itself carries meaning. And so, as this segment gently eases towards stillness, the idea of communication remains open and unresolved, like a signal traveling endlessly through space, unhurried, patient, and quiet, waiting not for certainty, but for the simple possibility of being heard. As the thought of communication drifts into the background, another quiet question begins to take shape, one that concerns not how we listen outward, but how this vast inquiry shapes us inward. The question of whether we are alone does not remain at the edge of science for long. It slowly seeps into our sense of identity, subtly influencing how we understand ourselves as individuals and as a species. For much of human history, meaning was drawn from immediacy, from land, community, ancestry, and story. The sky was present, but distant, a backdrop rather than a participant. As our understanding of the universe expanded, that backdrop began to move closer, pressing gently against our assumptions about importance, centrality, and purpose. To realize that Earth is not the center of the universe was already a profound shift. To consider that life might exist elsewhere adds another layer, one that quietly rearranges the psychological landscape. It invites a reconsideration of what it means to be unique, significant, or alone. This reconsideration does not have to diminish human value. Instead, it can soften rigid hierarchies and invite a more relational sense of meaning. Uniqueness does not require exclusivity. A single tree is no less meaningful because a forest exists. In the same way, humanity's significance need not depend on being the only example of conscious life. At the same time, the possibility of cosmic companionship can evoke subtle anxieties. If others exist, where does that leave us? How would we compare? Would our stories still matter? These questions often arise quietly, beneath the surface, shaped by deep emotional currents, rather than explicit reasoning. Such reactions are natural. The unknown has always stirred both wonder and unease. What matters is not the presence of these feelings, but how gently we hold them. When approached slowly, they can become invitations to maturity rather than sources of fear. There is also a different response, one grounded in care. If life exists elsewhere, then life itself becomes a more universal phenomenon, a thread woven through the fabric of reality, rather than an isolated accident. This perspective can deepen reverence for existence, encouraging a sense of responsibility towards the life we know here. Seen this way, the question of being alone becomes a mirror. It reflects our values, our hopes, and our fears back to us. It reveals what we cherish and what we worry might be lost. In doing so, it offers an opportunity for quiet self-understanding. Some find comfort in the idea that we may be alone, at least for now. It suggests that this small planet carries something rare and precious, deserving of care and attention. Others find comfort in the opposite idea, that the universe may be filled with life, each expression adding depth to the whole. Neither response is more correct than the other. Both arise from the same place, a desire to locate meaning within a vast and often indifferent cosmos. The question does not demand that we choose one feeling and discard the other. It allows for complexity. As awareness expands, a subtle shift can occur. The question stops feeling like a verdict and begins to feel like a context. It frames our existence without defining it. We remain who we are, thinking, feeling, fragile beings, regardless of what lies beyond our sky. In this context, humility becomes a quiet strength. To acknowledge that we do not know, and may never fully know, is not a failure of understanding. It is an honest response to scale. It aligns us with the slow rhythms of the universe, rather than placing us in opposition to them. This humility also fosters connection among humans. The shared act of wondering draws people together across cultures, beliefs, and generations. Even disagreement becomes part of a collective exploration, bound by curiosity rather than certainty. Over time, the question of whether we are alone begins to feel less isolating. It becomes something held collectively, like a long shared breath, a question passed gently from one mind to another, unchanged by answers, enriched by attention. As this reflection continues to settle, identity loosens slightly. The boundaries between self and universe blur, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, grounding one. We are part of something vast, whether or not others are out there listening. And as this segment slowly fades, the thought remains open and unforced, that perhaps the greatest impact of the question is not what it reveals about the universe, but what it reveals about us. As we sit calmly within the mystery, attentive, reflective, and quietly aware. As the reflection on identity gently settles, the mind may begin to drift toward another quiet dimension of this question, one that has accompanied humanity long before telescopes or equations existed. It is the philosophical and spiritual response to the vast unknown, the way humans have tried to place meaning around the silence of the cosmos. Long before science offered tools to explore distant stars, people looked upward and wondered. The night sky inspired myths, deities, stories of origin and destiny. These stories were not attempts to measure the universe, but to live within it, to feel oriented, connected, and less alone beneath its immensity. Even now, as scientific understanding grows, these older impulses have not disappeared. They have simply softened and transformed. The question, "Are we alone?" continues to touch the same deep place in the human psyche, the place where meaning, belonging, and mystery quietly converge. For some, the possibility of other life challenges spiritual frameworks. For others, it expands them. If life exists elsewhere, does it share the same source, the same spark of existence? Or does it arise through entirely different pathways, each equally valid and complete? These questions do not demand answers. They invite contemplation. Philosophy, in its slow and patient way, reminds us that meaning does not have to be singular. The universe can hold many truths at once, some compatible, some in tension, none fully complete. The search for others becomes part of a broader inquiry into what it means to exist at all. From this perspective, aloneness is not simply about numbers. It is not solved by counting civilizations or planets. Aloneness is an experience, a feeling shaped by perception, connection, and understanding. One can be surrounded by others and still feel alone. One can be solitary and yet feel deeply connected. This distinction matters. Even if the universe is filled with life, the human experience of existence remains intimate and immediate. Our awareness unfolds here, now, within a narrow band of time and space. The stars may be populated or empty. Either way, we still wake, breathe, think, and wonder in the same fragile way. Some philosophical traditions suggest that meaning arises not from answers, but from engagement, to ask questions sincerely, to remain attentive to experience, to act with care. These are ways of participating in existence, regardless of what lies beyond our knowledge. In this light, the cosmic question becomes less about resolution and more about orientation. It helps us locate ourselves within uncertainty, teaching us how to live with openness rather than fear. It encourages a posture of listening rather than control. Spiritual perspectives often echo this gentleness. Many emphasize humility before the unknown, reverence for existence, and acceptance of mystery. These themes resonate naturally with the vastness of the universe, where final explanations remain out of reach. Silence, in this context, is not an absence of meaning. It is a space where meaning can form slowly, personally, without being imposed. The quiet between stars mirrors the quiet within reflection, a place where understanding does not arrive as a conclusion, but as a presence. There is also a subtle ethical invitation here. If we do not know whether we are alone, then care becomes essential. Care for our planet, care for one another, care for the fragile conditions that allow awareness to exist at all. The uncertainty itself becomes a reason for gentleness. Rather than asking, "What does the universe owe us?" the question slowly shifts to, "How do we respond to being here?" The scale of the cosmos does not diminish responsibility, it deepens it. It reminds us that life, wherever it appears, is rare enough to matter. As philosophy and spirituality quietly intersect, the question of other life becomes a shared meditation rather than a problem to solve. It invites stillness. It encourages a long view. It asks us to be patient with what cannot be rushed. In this stillness, the boundaries between science and reflection soften. Facts remain facts, and uncertainty remains uncertainty, but neither needs to dominate the experience. They coexist, offering structure without closure. The universe, from this perspective, is not something to conquer or complete. It is something to inhabit thoughtfully, with awareness of both its vastness and our small but meaningful place within it. As these thoughts gently unfold, the mind may feel less pressure to arrive anywhere in particular. The question remains open, spacious, and calm, less like a riddle and more like a companion walking quietly beside us. And as this segment slowly drifts toward rest, the silence surrounding the stars begins to feel familiar rather than empty. A silence that does not demand answers, only presence, inviting the next reflection to emerge, softly, when it is ready. As the quiet presence of mystery settles more comfortably, another layer of reflection begins to surface, one that touches on responsibility and choice. The question of whether we are alone does not exist in isolation from how we act. It subtly influences how we treat our world, our technologies, and one another, even when we are not consciously aware of it. If life is rare, then Earth becomes profoundly precious. every forest, ocean, and living system takes on a deeper significance, not only as resources, but as expressions of a fragile continuity that may be uncommon in the universe. Care in this context is no longer only practical or ethical. It becomes almost custodial, a quiet guardianship of something extraordinary. If life is common, the responsibility does not disappear. It simply changes shape. We become participants in a larger community of existence, even if we never meet its other members. Our actions still matter, because they shape the kind of presence we bring into the universe. Either way, responsibility remains. This perspective gently reframes technological progress. Exploration, communication, and discovery are not merely achievements, they are expressions of values. The way we search reflects who we are, the patience we show, the caution we exercise, and the humility we maintain all signal something about our maturity as a species. Listening carefully to the universe also invites us to listen more carefully to Earth. The skills required are similar: attention, restraint, and respect for complexity. Ecosystems, like cosmic systems, are intricate and interdependent. They do not respond well to haste or oversimplification. In this sense, the search for others can become a practice in care. It teaches us to slow down, to observe patterns before intervening, and to accept that not everything is immediately knowable. These lessons are transferable, shaping how we relate to our own planet and to one another. There is also a quiet reminder here about scale. Human concerns often feel urgent and overwhelming, yet from a cosmic perspective, they are fleeting. This does not make them trivial. It places them within a larger frame, one that can soften extremes and encourage balance. When we remember that Earth is a small point of light in a vast expanse, conflicts rooted in division and dominance begin to feel less convincing. The question of being alone subtly encourages unity, not by erasing differences, but by reminding us of shared fragility. This shared fragility becomes especially clear when we consider the long future of life. Whether or not others exist, humanity carries forward a lineage shaped by billions of years of cosmic and biological evolution. Each decision we make becomes part of that unfolding story. From this viewpoint, ethics are no longer abstract rules. They are expressions of care for continuity, for the conditions that allow awareness, creativity, and curiosity to persist. The universe does not instruct us on how to behave, but it quietly contextualizes our choices. Responsibility also extends inward. How we hold uncertainty matters. We can respond with fear, denial, or impatience, or we can respond with openness and steadiness. The latter does not promise comfort, but it allows for growth. In learning to live with unanswered questions, we practice a form of inner resilience. We become less dependent on certainty and more capable of navigating ambiguity. This skill is valuable far beyond astronomy. It shapes how we face change, loss, and the unknown aspects of our own lives. The universe, vast and silent, becomes a kind of teacher, not through instruction, but through scale. It teaches by being what it is: expansive, complex, and largely indifferent to human timelines. In responding thoughtfully, we align ourselves with that scale rather than resisting it. This alignment does not require withdrawal or passivity. It encourages thoughtful action grounded in awareness rather than impulse. Exploration continue, questions can deepen, but they unfold within a wider sense of responsibility. Over time, the question of whether we are alone becomes less isolating and more connective. It links science with ethics, curiosity with care, and knowledge with humility. It invites a form of maturity that is quiet and steady rather than dramatic. As these reflections settle, the idea of responsibility feels less heavy and more natural. It does not demand perfection. It simply asks for attentiveness to consequences, to context, to the fragile beauty of existence. The universe does not rush us. It does not demand immediate answers or final conclusions. It allows room for gradual understanding and gentle correction. In this way, responsibility becomes a shared rhythm rather than a burden. And as this segment slowly softens towards stillness, the thought lingers that perhaps the question of being alone is not a test we must pass, but a space we are learning to inhabit, patiently, thoughtfully, with care for what we know, and respect for what remains beyond our reach. As the sense of responsibility gently settles, the mind may begin to widen once more, returning to the larger arc of existence itself, not to search for answers, but to rest within the scale of the question. Whether we are alone or not, the universe continues, unfolding at a pace far slower than human concern, carrying stars, worlds, and possibilities forward without urgency. There is something quietly grounding about this realization. The universe does not lean toward conclusion. It does not resolve its mysteries quickly. It allows them to remain open, sometimes for billions of years. In doing so, it offers a subtle invitation to loosen our grip on certainty and allow meaning to emerge gradually. In this wider view, the question of other life becomes less like a destination and more like a horizon. No matter how far we move toward it, it continues to open outward, expanding rather than closing. Horizons are not meant to be reached. They are meant to orient us. Orientation is a gentle form of guidance. It does not tell us what to think, but it helps us understand where we are. The vastness of the cosmos places our lives in context without stripping them of significance. Small things can still matter deeply within large systems. A single moment of awareness, someone listening quietly, breathing slowly, letting thoughts drift, is not diminished by cosmic scale. If anything, it becomes more remarkable. Awareness exists at all. Reflection occurs. Questions arise. The universe becomes conscious of itself, even briefly, through human experience. This perspective does not require that we assign purpose to the universe itself. Purpose can remain a human concept, shaped by values and choices. The cosmos does not need intention for meaning to exist within it. Meaning can arise locally, personally, gently. The idea that life might be rare or fleeting adds texture to this meaning. It reminds us that awareness is not guaranteed. It emerges under specific conditions, through long chains of cause and chance. Whether those chains occur once or many times does not change their delicacy. From here, the question of being alone begins to feel quieter, less urgent. It does not disappear, but it softens. It becomes something we carry lightly, like a thought that returns from time to time without demanding resolution. There is a calm strength in this lightness. It allows curiosity without pressure, exploration without desperation. It frees us from the need to define ourselves against the unknown. We do not need to prove our importance to the universe. We simply exist within it. This way of relating to the question can be deeply restful. It aligns with the rhythms of sleep, study, and contemplation. The mind is allowed to wander without chasing conclusions, to reflect without grasping. In this state, the universe feels less like an external object and more like a surrounding presence, not something to be solved, but something to be lived within. The stars do not demand interpretation, they simply remain. Humanity's place, then, is not fixed by whether others exist. It is shaped by how we respond to existence itself, with care or neglect, with curiosity or indifference, with openness or fear. This response unfolds moment by moment, in how we listen, in how we wonder, in how we treat one another. These choices do not echo across the universe in any dramatic way, yet they matter here, where awareness touches reality. The long silence of space can be understood in many ways. It can feel empty, or peaceful, or full of potential. None of these interpretations are final. They reflect inner states as much as external facts. As the mind rests within this openness, the question of being alone loses its sharp edges. It becomes a companion rather than a challenge, a presence that invites thought without demanding answers. Even uncertainty begins to feel different, not as a lack, but as a space where imagination, humility, and patience can coexist, a space that does not need to be filled. The universe, vast and unhurried, continues to offer this space freely, does not rush us toward understanding. It allows us to move at the pace of awareness, which is slow, reflective, and often circular. In this slowness, something subtle becomes clear. Whether or not we ever know if we are alone, the act of wondering has already shaped us. It has expanded perspective, softened certainty, and deepened attention. And perhaps that is enough for now. As this segment gently draws toward stillness, the thoughts do not close. They remain open, like the night sky itself, wide, quiet, and patient, waiting not for answers, but for awareness to continue unfolding, softly, in its own time. As the long arc of reflection begins to settle into its final quiet, there is no need for resolution. The question of whether we are alone does not ask to be concluded. It asks to be held, gently, patiently, without force. At this point, the universe feels less like a mystery pressing in from the outside, and more like a spacious context surrounding everything we are. Stars burn and fade, galaxies drift, time stretches beyond comprehension, and within all of that, awareness flickers. Here, now, listening. Whether life exists elsewhere may remain unknown for a very long time, perhaps forever. And yet, the absence of an answer does not leave a void. Instead, it leaves room for humility, room for care, room for quiet meaning to form without being dictated. There is something deeply human about this posture, to live with open questions, to accept that some truths are approached, not grasped, to find steadiness not in certainty but in presence. In the end, the question, "Are we alone?" subtly transforms. It becomes less about others and more about how we inhabit our own existence, how we treat this moment, how we relate to one another, how gently we move through a fragile world, aware that awareness itself is rare enough to matter. If the universe is silent, it is not a hostile silence. It is a wide silence, capable of holding countless possibilities. If the universe is inhabited, it is likely inhabited quietly, thoughtfully, each form of life unfolding within its own context, its own rhythms, its own questions. Either way, the night sky remains. It does not demand belief or disbelief. It does not insist on meaning or deny it. It simply exists, inviting reflection without urgency. Perhaps this is the deepest gift of the question, not the hope of contact, nor the fear of isolation, but the invitation to slow down, to listen, to recognize that we are part of something vast, even if we do not fully understand what that something is. In this slowing, anxiety softens. Urgency loosens its grip. The mind is allowed to rest, not because everything is known, but because not everything needs to be known right now. Existence continues regardless of our answers. Breath follows breath. Thought follows thought. Curiosity returns in gentle waves. There is time. If others exist somewhere beyond our reach, they are living their own moments of awareness, their own quiet wonder. If they do not, then this small planet carries a unique responsibility to know itself, to care for itself, and to listen carefully to the silence that surrounds it. Neither possibility demands despair. Both invite attentiveness. And so, as this final segment fades, there is nothing to resolve, nothing to close, only a calm awareness of being here, now, within a vast and patient universe. The question remains open, and you can rest with it, quietly, without needing an answer, just listening as the universe continues endlessly softly unfolding.